We've all heard the saying that success leaves clues, but here's the question for you. Are the successful people that you know in your life today doing things that you haven't quite caught on to yet? Let's discover that now. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Grow with Tim podcast. I am not Tim. You are.
I'm Tim Joiner, and this is JDew.
Yes, okay, very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we're doing on this episode is Tim asked me an interesting question as we started to think through this one, and it was, hey, JDew, who do you know specifically that you would consider successful, and what are some of the characteristics that we can kind of map those people to and come up with this idea that success leaves clues, and if it does, then how can we utilize what we've learned from the people around us? So why did you come up with this idea, and where did this kind of success leaves clues idea come from, you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's an idea that has been percolating in my mind for a decade or two, but I knew somebody, I worked with somebody that was super successful once, and he was constantly talking about how really successful people are just good copiers. And it was kind of irritating because I considered myself a pretty creative, smart person, and I want to invent my own way. And he's like, look, don't reinvent the wheel. Figure out somebody that's already succeeded and look at what he or she's doing and then emulate them, and it's a whole lot faster way to success. And I found it irritating for a long time. I think what I've come to peace with is I'm not just going to do a carbon copy or exactly the same thing as anybody does. But if I can take the nuggets from dozens of successful people, success does leave clues. There are common things that most successful people do. And if I can take those raw ingredients and make my own meal, I'm good with that. So
here's my question. First off, why do you think that? Did you feel like some sort of internal connection to your ability to be smart or look smart? Why is it that copying for you was kind of like a blow, a blow to the gut?
So that's a good question, and I don't know. I mean, that might be a question for my therapist.
Maybe you need therapy, right?
Yeah, right?
Maybe that's what it is.
So I think that part of it actually felt like cheating. Like in school, right? You and I went to the same institution of higher learning.
But that's what I'm asking, because I'm literally thinking growing up, you were homeschooled, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I went to regular school, and in school, we all know, and successful people, and we hear it in entrepreneurism all the time that, well, you're cheating if you copy and you utilize other people. Right.
And I despise people that just you go on somebody's website or something and they've got this blog post that is a total ripoff of what somebody else wrote. And it's always made me feel dirty, right? And so I think when this guy, who was incredibly successful and very wealthy and had a big business, multiple big businesses, when he kept saying, you just got to find somebody that's doing what you want to do and copy him, it felt almost like cheating. And I don't actually think it is. I think you find a business model that works and you emulate that business model. There's nothing unethical about it.
Internally, there was a struggle on your personality.
And it also, to be frank, I've never been attracted to franchise. We got a lot of people that listen to this that I'm sure are excellent franchisees, and that's great. For me, being a franchisee never appealed to me because it seemed boring. I don't want to run somebody else's playbook. I want to kind of make my own, right?
Well, and I think that is what you and I are doing in our entrepreneurial life. And there are plenty of people that take risks and work hard, and they are those franchise type people.
It just isn't for me.
Yeah,
it isn't for me.
Fine.
But I think that Carlin, this guy I'm talking about, that said you just got to copy somebody that's been there, done that. What he was really getting at is, you don't have to start with zero. There's so many clues that success leaves. Look, if he's the best XYZ, whatever it is, underwater basket weaver, then figure out how he weaves his underwater baskets. And if she's the best whatever, take the cream from all of that and put it together, and whatever it is that you want to do, don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you're going to build a buggy, right, you don't have to start with the wheels. You can go buy a wheel. You can buy a wheel from this person and buy a hinge from this person and put it together. And that's kind of my take on it.
Gotcha.
So what I hope to do in this podcast is you and I this is something that this is the other reason why I want to do this podcast with you. You and I have both been fortunate enough to interact with some really remarkable people.
Agreed.
In your line of work, you get access to people that most of the world doesn't get access to.
Which sometimes you forget until you sit down and I'm kind of posed with the question.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? I do know lots of good folks.
Yeah.
Big folks. And
I've had some equally remarkable, maybe not equally, but remarkable opportunities to interact with billionaires and people that are incredibly successful, not just financially, but in the nonprofit world and with their families and with their church, and lots of different really successful people that you and I have access to. And a lot of people, observe like celebrity business people from a distance, and all they know is the public persona. But you and I have flown places with people and sat in the back of cars with people and sat down for dinner with people that are super successful.
Yeah.
And I want us to talk about what we've learned from these people and what can our listeners apply and
what have we stolen? What do we get away with?
Yeah, right.
And like, you know what? I realized this, so it's going to be free to you because it took us a lifetime of being in the right rooms and getting the green lights for a lot of these conversations.
You got it. So tell us about somebody that you respect and admire. And by the way, we're intentionally avoiding like the celebrities that seem almost untouchable. Like
we have another podcast for that. So go
right.
back and watch that one and listen to that one. But,
so today we want to talk about kind of down to earth people that are within reach, right? These are not people like, well, they're just blessed with super intelligence, or they were born with a golden spoon in their mouth, silver spoon in their mouth, or whatever. These are kind of down to earth people that have really achieved a remarkable level of success, and we want to find out what they're doing differently from the rest of the world, right?
Yep.
So, all right, you've got some people in mind.
Okay, yes. Person number one, ladies and gentlemen, I've mentioned it on this podcast several times. Maybe it's because my sphere is a little bit too narrow. I don't know. Tim, help me out. But in our city, Greenville, South Carolina, I have been an employee and potentially mentored by and a little bit in a friend relationship with one of the most successful guys and the most publicly successful guys in our town. His name is Craig, and he owns the baseball team.
Yep.
So Craig, as a reminder, Tim, he was in Midtown Manhattan during the 90s, and during that time, he was in a CFO type position during about 200 mergers and acquisitions. And somewhere in there, he made a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole bunch of money. And he decided to come down to our area, the upstate of South Carolina in the northwest corner, and put a minor league baseball team back into play because the old team had moved away. So I was his employee, and that's how we met originally. And I was employed by him at some level for about 10 years.
Yep.
And during that time, I learned a lot of things. And the big thing that I took away from this guy, now, number one, here's one thing that I'll say. You mentioned in our last episode, I believe, that when you got off to college and you were living in the dorms with a bunch of dudes and got new friends and new opportunities, new state, that, wow, these people are different than me.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
I'd lived a pretty sheltered, narrow life before that, right?
So what I realized is being the personality that I have and being paid very handsomely at sometimes for doing what I do and speaking and things like that, is the celebrity we see on television a lot of times has a very similar personality to me. Actors, ball players and things like that. You know, they get on, the ones that we know are the ones who go and they show out at press conferences.
Yeah.
They end up as guest stars on talk shows and things. So they talk like me, right? They have personalities.
Right.
This man does not.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Craig, if you're out there, I think he understands that. He hired me to be a personality at his ballpark. However, this man was so different than me. And one of the things that I noticed from him, because it wasn't about his speaking ability, he even had to opening night at our ballpark, literally opening night, 2006. He had to give a little speech.
Yeah.
He was not happy about it, didn't want to do it. He just figured that was the place to do something.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how do you get this rich, this wealthy, this respected and all that stuff and never like want to even talk? Like, I mean that was my eye-opening moment. I don't even know how that would work. What is he good at? One of those things that I really discovered from Craig is what I would just call partnerships. Is he realized that, and this is some of his words, actually, and some of the mantra behind it, kind of the mission statement down there at the ballpark, is that he wanted what they were bringing to town. He had two partners at the time, but he's the only guy now. It wanted it to be in the fabric of the community, meaning that there was going to be civic and private and public partnerships, and I think we kind of understand that when we think about sports teams. Like, you have to have the blessing of the mayor and the government and the councils and things like that. But he really worked hard on that. And I'm a lone wolf type of guy. He really understood that he needed to partner with churches. He needed to partner with schools and the school district, partner with the mayor and the council, because it wasn't about his personality.
Yeah.
That was my mind-blown moment, because this man is the most boring guy in the meeting.
Uh-huh.
And that's not me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, he's killing it, though, compared to me.
Interesting. So a lot of nuggets in there. Number one is, somebody said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with a team, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, probably people that tend to be earlier in their careers, tend to be these rugged individualists. Like, I don't need a team. Like, they'll just slow me down. Like, I'm smart and I know how to do stuff and I know how to get stuff done, and let me just go do it. And the problem is you hit a ceiling eventually with that. Somebody like Craig has evidently figured out that it's got to be bigger than just him, right? No surprise. But in general, I think what somebody like Craig has figured out maps to one of the items on my list, which is leverage. Mm-hmm. The problem with going alone is basically you're trading hours for dollars, right? Yeah. And there's a limit. Even if you are the most successful attorney, in your town, and you're a brain surgeon or you're whatever really highly paid individual, there's a limit to what you can bill as an hourly rate, right? I mean, really good attorneys, maybe $500, $600, $700 an hour or something like that, but there's a limit.
Yeah.
And so most people that are really successful have figured out how to leverage what they have. They leverage their time, they leverage their relationships, partnerships, they leverage their assets, they leverage their dollars and their financial resources. And leverage, I think, for me, Craig with his 200 mergers and acquisitions clearly understood leverage. And what you're talking about is how he worked with the team. So he leverages his own skills. He's really good at a certain number of things, but he wasn't the guy directing on-field entertainment.
Of course, right.
And he wasn't a lone ranger that was going to do all this by himself, right?
Right. Yeah, and of course he had to establish a staff. But even going back to his CFO days, I've only got to imagine. I haven't had conversations with him about that. But he wasn't the personality putting it together either.
Yeah.
He was able to be involved in someone else who had a vision of leveraging a bunch of things, and he was in the right seat, right place, doing a good job, and he was able to capitalize from that. So he realized, if we find the right teams to put together, then you make something way bigger. Because no one person is pulling off. Right. I mean, I think they had the record in the 90s in the world for how much they were able to scale because of the things they bought and acquired. So,
Strategic Coach talks about unique ability, and basically, what are you good at? What do you love to do? What are you always getting better at? Focus your time and energy there, right? As a kid, you're not very good at math. They're like, oh, Jeremiah, here's an extra math worksheet, right? Fix this weakness of yours. And, oh, you're not very good at English. Well, here's an extra English worksheet. And spend a little more time, get a tutor. You're always fixing your weaknesses. But there comes a time where you've got to say, look, you're not very good at math. You probably shouldn't be an accountant.
Yeah.
But look, you're awesome at this other thing. Maybe you should go do that and lean into your strengths, right? But what that means is, as you get narrower and narrower over time, you're not doing anything that you're only mediocre at. You're getting narrower and narrower. That means that you've got to have a team of people who are awesome at the things that you're not awesome at.
Right. You better have an accountant. It's not you, but you better have one. If you get really great at what you're doing, hopefully some money comes, and if that's success to you, someone needs to manage it.
He's not a front man. He's not the personality. I don't know Craig personally, so I don't know what skills he has, but I'm sure he has some really deep skills somewhere.
Numbers.
He's good at numbers. But he's got other people that he surrounds himself with that do other things.
Yeah.
So for me, it's bigger. I'm going to generalize that a little bit and go back to the idea of leverage. I think most successful people leverage everything. So how do people leverage their time? I've told you before about Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach, and I heard him once say that he loves to travel to the Four Seasons, right? Four Seasons Hotel, really nice hotel chain in North America, maybe internationally, I'm not sure. And basically that's the only place he stays. And then one day he and his wife were talking about how, it's so nice at the Four Seasons, but then we come home and we have to do all this stuff. So they made a rule that they only do at home what they would do if they were staying in a Four Seasons.
Okay.
So what that means is they hired a personal chef.
Yeah.
because they don't really like to cook, and they've got better things to do with their time. Things that they really leverage their time. So they don't do their own house cleaning. They don't wash their own clothes. They don't drive their own cars. They don't like anything that they wouldn't have to do at Four Seasons. They don't do at home. That's kind of an extreme case. Most of us don't live in a world where that's practical, but they've figured out how to leverage their time and focus all of their energy on the things that they are uniquely gifted at, and they surround themselves with people that do other things that they're not uniquely gifted at, and everybody comes out ahead. So
that's crazy.
Leveraging your time, leveraging your assets, right? You've got to figure out how to have assets that are making money for you, whether that's a business or a portfolio of businesses, whether that's real estate, rental property, or somehow you've got to have more than just the 24 hours in your day of you trying to do everything. And I think wealthy people have figured out how to leverage their time and their money and their other resources and their partnerships and everything. The leverage is a big thing that we could probably do a whole podcast on, but for now, let's move on. Who else you got?
Yeah, well, I think that all of these things, right, can be spun out and have their own book and their own series, right, and things like that. Okay, so the next person I want to introduce you to is wonderful, wonderful lady in our town, once again, who runs the Ronald McDonald House charity. So most of us know that because that is an international brand. And what the Ronald McDonald House does is helps families stay close together when a child is sick, injured, in the hospital, or seeking medical care. So the reason I know that tagline so well is because I get hired by this group in our town to do their spokespersoning type work. And they have an annual gala, and they have fundraising activities, they have volunteer appreciation things and things like that. So I'm involved with them. So her name is Marty. And Marty's been at the helm of that for probably a dozen plus years. And what I have learned from her specifically is the idea of communicating a vision, communicating a mission, why it's important. Now, most people out there there's a connection to families who are hurting. Sick kids. I mean, have a heart people. Yeah. All of us kind of understand that. But what you have to keep doing, what's interesting about this particular mission is that as the moment one kid has a success story and one family is able to move on, hopefully in a better place health-wise, the next family moves in with a very devastating, terrible new situation. And people are constantly in need of that medical care. We have a great health system from several different health communities that are in our area, and a lot of people come to our house. We have a 24-bed facility, and it's beautiful. It went from 12 to 24 about 4 years ago. And what I see on a consistent basis is communicating to a new volunteer group, communicating to a new church group, a new school group. We need cookies baked. They have fresh cookies baked by volunteers in our local Ronald McDonald House every day.
Yeah, I love it.
Every single day. And I'm thinking, man, the problem with me is I want the problem to be solved. And I'm sure the families that I've met inside, they want the problem to be solved in their personal cases as well. But man, this conundrum of families and kids dealing with medical treatment will never go away. So what she does really well is involve other people in the mission and the vision on a day-to-day basis over and over and over. That's a lot of cookies, Tim.
It is a lot of cookies. And, and you can get excited about baking cookies for a week or two, right? But after a while, it becomes this burden.
That's
if
what
you're
I
not
think.
constantly re-energized by this vision of why you're at the big why, right? I think it was in the last episode we talked about, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people and send them to the forest to collect wood and assign tasks and responsibilities and all right, you do this and you do that to build a ship, right? Instead, impress upon them, compel them to look forward to the endless immensity of the sea. Like, look, don't you want to be out on that sea? And if they get energized by the vision, the outcome, then they're going to gladly come alongside you and help you build that ship.
Right.
And so if you're going to be successful, you probably are going to have to think big. You're going to have to think about the endless immensity of the sea and be really good at communicating that vision. And it's not enough just to stand up and give a speech once a year and say, all right, this is what the Ronald McDonald House does.
Right.
You've got to constantly be stoking those fires and communicating that vision. and thinking bigger than everybody else inside your organization.
Yes, because they have to. That's another good point that you just mentioned. Because if you have a big mission and vision that you're trying to get across, right? The mission of keeping families close, the vision of making sure that people feel like they're at home. Four Seasons. Our facility in our town is very homey.
Yeah.
Makes you feel like you're at home, not in a dorm, not in a hotel, not in a hospital,
right.
Of course. And the thing is you have to communicate a vision where everyone fits inside of that. She's got to fit whatever it is. 1,000 volunteers per year in and underneath that umbrella of a vision in their respective roles, from cleaning the floor, mopping, doing dishes, and baking cookies every day.
Somebody told me a while back that your vision has to be so big that everybody else's vision can fit into it if you want to attract highly driven, successful people, right? If you want to work with great people, there's got to be room for their vision inside of yours.
Right.
And if you have a small vision or even a medium-sized vision, all you're going to attract are small-minded people that can easily fit in there. But if you want really phenomenal people that are going to bring their best selves, you've got to think bigger, right?
Yes.
I'll tell you a story about thinking bigger. And one of the things I've told you many times, I love being the youngest, dumbest, poorest person in any room, right? Least successful person. Some people want to be like the big fish in a small pond, and I want to be the little fish in a big pond because that's where I learn the most. That's where I grow the most, right? And so I'm frequently challenged to think bigger. I don't know, this was probably 6 or 8 months ago. I was trying to put together about a $2 million deal, which for me was a pretty big deal. Like, this is not something I do every day, right? And I'm working really hard to put together multiple parties and investors and financiers and putting together this $2 million deal. And I met another really successful guy that's had multiple exits and done some amazing things. And he listened to my problem. And then he said, you know, Tim, it's easier to raise $20 million than $2 million. And I said, it is? And he said, yeah, because you've got people that are in a different echelon, and it's easy for them to stroke that kind of a check. When you're trying to raise $2 million, like usually you're talking to somebody that it's a big chunk of their savings and they've got all this due diligence and whatever. And then he said, now, look, the deal that you're trying to put together, you're buying this business from this other person, but this other person is like trying to retire and get out of all of his businesses. And this is just one thing you're trying to buy, but he's got this whole big portfolio of businesses. Mm-hmm. He says, why don't you go to that guy and say, look, you're trying to get rid of everything. Let me solve that problem for you. Let me just buy the whole portfolio, and you can raise money this way and do. And it was and to this guy, it was just like, well, yeah, it's easier to raise $20 million than $2 million, and here's the way to do it. And you can put, and so he's thinking way bigger than I am. This is the same guy, by the way, that's trying to make moonshine on the moon. He's like hired NASA, not NASA, a rocket scientist basically from the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he's got this team he's put together, and he's legitimately working on making a moonshine distillery on the moon, and he's doing all kinds of other big things. But my point is that he thinks big, and then he's really good at communicating those stories, that vision, to employees, to board members, to investors, to other people. And I think really successful people think big and communicate that vision in appropriate and inspiring ways.
Love it. And I think that's what Marty brings to the table. Yes.
All right.
Good.
Who else you got?
Okay, so my next person, we're going to go back to the baseball world here, and it's somebody that I interacted with for a very short period of time, but was very impressed with. And this was Gabe Kapler. If we got any baseball fans out there, they're going to remember that Gabe Kapler was a major leaguer. But after, I believe it was 9 seasons in the majors, he retired. And he started coaching in the Red Sox organization, which I was involved in. So he came down, fresh retired from majors, could have kept playing, I think, probably. Wasn't injured, wasn't too old. Baseball, a lot of bodies can take some hits for a little while. And he started working with first, second, third year team. He was managing our team, and these guys are nobody was older than me by the time I hit like 24.
Yeah.
So everybody is between 18 and 24, we'll say, because I'm pretty sure some of those Latin players had fudge birthdays. Okay, some very big 18-year-olds. There's no chance. Okay, so anyway, that's a whole nother story. But what I realized from this man is his future was bigger than his current situation.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, Tim, is because, as I recall, 9 years in the majors doesn't get you a pension. But crazy enough, if you didn't know, that 10 years in the majors get you, as a part of that Players Association, a pension.
Pretty sweet deal.
Yes, a pension. But he only played 9 and then got out.
Yeah.
What happened over the course of managing the team with a bunch of 20-year-olds is he realized, I don't know, didn't have this specific conversation with him, walked by his office all the time, saw him every night, is he decided to go back and be pro again. So during the time where he was managing and coaching these players, these younger players and these newer players developing in the organization of the Red Sox, at some point he decided he was still better than them, or he knew the whole time. And I remember him specifically saying that he started to get really frustrated because the players, some of the players, because we had Red Sox, this is in the era, Tim, if you don't recall, 2004 and 2007, the Red Sox, we won World Series. So some of these players, though, did not take their nutrition seriously on a day-to-day basis, did not work out, show up on time. They stayed up late. You know, some of their pros for the first time, and they're young. Some of them are teenagers, so they got a signing bonus, maybe of $500,000, $1 million, and they're making pennies to play every day, but they had gotten some money, bought themselves a car, got some girlfriends in each of our cities. I'm telling you, that's the whole thing. So I was watching it, but he decided after one season of being a manager to go back. And he was killing it in his first month back. So this is the month of April for all you baseball fans out there. First month back, 10th season now, highest batting average in the league for the first month.
So what did he do to be able to achieve that?
What he did on a day-to-day basis, I realized, was this man was chiseled straight out of Michelangelo's laboratory. I'm not joking. This man was cut everywhere. And I remember specifically his personal training and his diet were still on point because at some point he realized, I'm going back. He saw a future that was compelling to him to keep doing the day-to-day tasks that are the monotonous stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah. So he was making hard choices now that were going to yield future benefit.
Yes.
So that's on my list too, is I think really successful people maintain this wonderful investor mindset. They're always making temporary sacrifice in exchange for future reward, and the future reward far exceeds the temporary sacrifice, right? I was with a group of business people earlier today, and we were talking about this very topic, about how can we invest our time and our energy and our resource and our focus in order to yield or reap future benefits. Albert Einstein says the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest.
Right, yeah.
But that applies to time just as much as it does to money. You and I probably, I don't know, several months ago, still one of my favorite episodes of the podcast, we talked about investing time, not just money. And I think that's what this guy was doing. Like, he was investing in his future. He was making temporary sacrifices, hard choices that maybe some of the ball players he was managing weren't, which was so frustrating to him, right?
Yeah.
But then he comes back after sitting out for a year or two, and he's got the best batting average in the league.
Killing it. The Brewers, I think he went back to Milwaukee. And I think that it was frustrating to him to be around someone with a compelling future vision who's willing to take those hits today, those sacrifices today. It was also frustrating to be around people who weren't doing that. And he knew what the payoff could be. Yeah. Look, this is small potato, small town stuff.
Yeah.
You know, what if we get back to the majors and you make the big money and you have the big checks and you have the opportunities that come along with it, endorsements and stuff like that?
I think almost every successful person I've seen, even the breakout successes that are like on magazine covers, what's frustrating is most people only see them once they hit the magazine cover.
Right.
And it's like, wow, an overnight success, 20 years in the making. Right? It's like, wow, these people are amazing. What you don't see is all the hard work that they did. And one thing I've noticed, these people get interviewed, and they, you know, the TV reporter or whatever will ask them what their secret is, and they never talk about the years of slog because, well, I don't know why they don't, but it's almost like, you know, the person who lost all this weight or they've achieved something remarkable, they find something simple to say, like, oh yeah, I started drinking this juice or whatever, right? But what you don't see is that they were actually working out 90 minutes a day for the last 2 years, or they were making sacrifices that are not necessarily popular to talk about.
Because it's the small choices that add up, but they're small choices. So it's even harder to talk about, like, well, every single morning I wake up and go, here we go again, but I know what I'm going for. I know I'll feel good afterward, working out. But that stuff is hard to talk about. Like, it's like, well, I mean, the secret sauce is the repetitiveness of the focus.
You got it.
Yeah.
All right. So far we've got successful people use leverage. They partner with people to cover for strengths that they don't have, or to provide strengths that they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
They leverage their assets, their time, their money. We've got that they communicate a bigger vision, and the vision has to be big enough and inspiring enough and repeated enough that people come along with them. We've got that they play a long game. They make temporary sacrifices in order to, reap future rewards. And I think you've got one more story for us.
I do. So I want to introduce you to my buddy Jody. So Jody lives in our community as well. He owns a portfolio of rental properties that probably is in the 400 range. Okay. Last I checked with him. So
400
I
doors. 400
doors.
Yeah, okay.
400 doors. Many
couple.
single family places, mobile homes, several parks as well. I've done a lot of ride-alongs with this guy. So Tim, I met him in an environment that allowed me to spend time with him. And then when I got into a place, very sticky situation, which probably needs a whole podcast, where I was broke, I knew I could call him, and there was things that were sticky points in his business, and I bet you I could get myself employed tomorrow.
Yep.
So that's what I did.
Yep.
And for about 6 months, I was his right-hand man.
Yep.
And it was problem-solving type idea. I wasn't out there actually pouring concrete, mowing lawns, fixing leaks, none of that. I would go to his office, and we would try to tackle the fact that he was having his other handymen to submit timesheets for the last 15 years on paper. Mm-hmm. So we figured out how to, I've heard of this app, and maybe you could figure it out for me. So we did stuff like that. But during that time, I got to see numbers.
So you were leveraging him. He was using you to get more leverage.
Yes.
He knew
100%.
that there was this app. He knew there was a better way, but he didn't have the time or the patience or the energy or the skill set to do
Jody
it. So he
is not
said,
that guy.
Jeremiah,
Right.
Go solve this problem, make it go away. He was leveraging.
100%.
Okay.
He knew that I could go look at the internet, which is not his thing.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay.
So Jody, great dude. Love this dude. He's the type of guy who'll never listen to this. So let me tell you a few things, all right? I mean, this man cannot put a sentence together, can't spell, probably can't. He probably couldn't spell my name.
Yeah.
Probably couldn't spell my name. But what I saw here was a man who,
But he had
what I would
400
say-
doors.
Correct.
Yeah.
Number one is he minded his own business. That's what he focuses on. Tim, when I tell you I have never met someone who had more unread text messages. Text messages, ladies and gentlemen, how many unread text messages do you have right now? Take a look at your device if you are able. 0, 1, 2 that you know you're going to get to after lunch? Hundreds of unread text messages. And we all of our moms have tens of thousands of unread emails, but I'm talking text messages on his phone. So what he was great at was focusing in on what he was there to do. And this man loved his game. His game was mobile homes, riding around looking at them, getting a Caterpillar and a Bobcat and scraping some stuff over here, dumping some concrete, looking and checking on his guys to make sure they weren't stealing hours from this paper, this paper they were submitting. That's what he just loved to do. So he's just focused on it. So Tim, another thing is how focused this guy is. If you call him, he ain't picking up. But if you know where to find him, it ends up as a ride along. So that's how you learn too, because I'm riding along. Hey, I got this question, this idea, want to talk to you, want to see you. He's not going to stop working.
So he's not hanging out for 90 minutes in a coffee shop.
Oh no,
He's
no
not.
chance.
He's not shooting the breeze with his,
There's no
other
breeze
real
shooting.
estate buddies.
There's no breeze
right?
shooting.
He's focused and he's not wasting time.
He
That's
is
what I'm hearing.
on it. So
Okay.
yeah, if you're gonna hang out with him, it's
You're gonna be in
meet
his
him
truck
at his next stop.
Yep.
If he's not in the office, meet him at his next stop, and then your car's getting left because you're gonna need to ride around. He's got to go drop some stuff off at the court. He's gonna go check on this place over here. He's got to deposit some cash.
Yeah.
He's just doing his stuff all
Yeah.
day, and that's what he loves.
So that's on my list too, is that successful people tend to be really focused and not just efficient but effective. They're using their time in the pursuit of a goal they've identified as important, right? I told you before, I don't know if it was the last podcast a couple times ago, I had the opportunity a long time ago to work in IT at a real estate company.
Yes.
This was when I was in grad school, and learned a lot from that opportunity. But I would go every Tuesday afternoon to this real estate company, and they'd have a list of IT problems, and I would spend a couple hours on Tuesday afternoons solving all these problems for people, and made good money and helped pay my way through grad school. So what I noticed was most real estate agents at this company, they had several hundred agents, were always in the cafe. They were out there watching the news. They were talking about how this buyer is so terrible and this home inspector really screwed this deal over. Right. And they were always complaining and kvetching and gossiping. And then you had the star performers who were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Their doors were always closed.
Okay.
Like, they just had their head down and they were working. They were never out there. They might come out and get a cup of coffee, and then they turn around and went right back to work. Right. Whereas these other people, literally for several hours a day, I don't know, I guess it made them feel good to talk, and maybe they thought they were learning or they were networking or something. But I got access to the numbers, and I saw
week after week.
Week after week,
you saw the same people in the same roles.
And I knew some of those people that were out there for hours a day were selling like 3 or 4 houses a year. They weren't even making minimum wage, man. It wasn't a job; it was a hobby. But you had the people that were really producing, were like focused, right? Yeah. And I think even people that pride themselves on efficiency, most of us have traps. Like, I don't know whether it's social media or it's YouTube or it's food. You're playing a game on your phone or whatever, and you can end up wasting a lot of time. I'm not saying that you should be workaholics. Far from it. A workaholic doesn't meet my definition of success. Like, I want to live a well-balanced life where I'm enjoying time with my friends and my family and spending time with God and producing. But when I work, I work.
Yeah.
Right? And let's not play at work, or let's not constantly get distracted. Like,
so, and one thing, we haven't said the word success since the beginning of the podcast. You just brought it up again. Once again, these people that we're talking about all had completely different personalities. Yeah. The 4 people that I've mentioned, completely different lines of business. Athlete, real estate, big community partnerships, nonprofit. Yeah. Way different. And success means different things to different people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm looking at things in completely different areas. But for Jody, what he does, how he does it, and how much joy he pulls from it, that's success. Yeah. For me, I would have a very hard time.
Yeah, you wouldn't want that job.
No, I wouldn't want that job. But I did learn because of him.
Right. I think that is important to acknowledge before we wrap up, that success means different things to different people. And what I hate is there is sort of a stereotypical success in America, at least, that I don't really like. Like, you have this uber wealthy, famous person that has been divorced 3 times, and his kids hate him, and he's got
he's
that
being
sounds
sued
terrible
all the time because of maybe undermining underhanded deals.
That's not success for me.
Unfortunately, I think many people that you and I know are not those people. We've probably been blessed to be in circles where we don't know a lot of those people, and we've known 1 or 2 that are those people, and we're like, that's just not success for me.
Right, for sure. But even those people I can take nuggets from. Like, there are things that they have done well, and let me learn from those, and maybe learn from their mistakes as well as their successes. But I'm not trying to copy somebody that meets some external standard of success. That gets back to how we started this podcast. So anyway, we've got a lot more to talk about.
We do.
We've already exceeded our time.
Yes.
So
I need to hear about some of your people coming up in the next episode. Ladies and gentlemen, if success is leaving clues in your life, what we want to know is maybe some of those comments about the people that you know, what they're doing, and what areas we have not mentioned yet. And Tim, my challenge for you, I need to know some of your people.
All right. Next week. We'll be back. 2 weeks. 2 weeks we'll be back.
See you soon.